네, 안녕하세요. 세바시 나머지 45의 구범준 PD입니다. 오늘은 멀리 미국에서 오신 손님을 초대했습니다. 여러분, 나는 메트로폴리탄 미술관의 경비원입니다. 이 책 아시죠? 한국에서 굉장히 베스트셀러가 됐는데요. 이 책의 저자는 놀랍게도 큐레이터가 아니라 책 제목에서 알 수 있듯이 메트로폴리탄 미술관의 경비원을 했던 분입니다. 패트릭 브링리라는 이름의 이 책의 저자를 오늘 이 시간에 모셔봤습니다. Can you briefly introduce yourself and the book to Sebasi subscribers?
Sure. I'm Patrick Bringley. I wrote a book called All the Beauty in the World, and it's about a decade I spent as a guard at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City.
Yeah. This book, right?
That book right there.
This book special edition to celebrate 20,000 books selling.
200,000 books.
I'm sorry. 200,000.
I know. It's been wild. I'm so excited about the success of the book in this country. It's amazing.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So I read the book, and through your book, I learned about your brother's passing due to the cancer. Actually, I've had a similar experience to yours, though of course I have not lost my brother. My older brother was diagnosed with liver cancer in his early 30s. It was about 20 years ago. He was intelligent and a source of hope for our family. My brother, like yours, was a math prodigy during the school years. When our family learned about my brother's cancer, it felt as if all hope had vanished. Fortunately, after undergoing a major surgery, he miraculously survived, and he is now working as a history professor. At the time, I cried for hours with drinking soju alone at the thought that he might die. So I think I can sympathize with you a little bit. It has been a long time, but I sincerely want to express my condolences for the loss of your brother. Your brother's passing was a significant turning point in your life, right? Though many people face loss but respond in different ways. What made you choose a job as a security guard at the Met?
Yes, well, thank you for that, and I'm sorry to hear about your brother's struggles, and I'm so glad that he has recovered. Yes, people respond to loss in different ways. I just know that when my brother died, I didn't want to just rush back to some office job where I would be worried about office politics or corporate ladder climbing or what your clients need or something like that. That felt very small and felt very kind of insignificant. And I had spent all this time in hospital rooms with a young man, my brother, who had suffered, and there was something very painful about it. There was also something very kind of sacred about it and beautiful about being in these quiet little spaces with him. And he suffered so bravely and was so kind of just a model for all of us through that. And then when he died, I didn't want to, I wanted to be someplace where I could continue to be quiet and think about things that are maybe higher or maybe more basic or more elemental, maybe sacred. And I love this museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I was kind of made speechless by my brother's death. And I wanted to kind of just stand still a while. And I found this job where I could stand still professionally inside of this great museum around these works of art that are often about suffering or about life and death and things like that. And I was just grateful to spend time among them.
What kind of work did you do before becoming a security guard?
I was working at the New Yorker magazine, which is a fancy magazine. I was in their events planning department. So I was putting on something we call the New Yorker Festival. And it's this festival in New York that has authors and speakers and musicians and all sorts of things all around. So it felt very glamorous, but I wasn't writing for the magazine, but I aspired to write. And I was hoping that, maybe I would climb the ladder there.
Okay. New Yorker. A pretty good job, right?
It was. I mean, especially for someone who had studied the liberal arts in college, and you come out and you think, what sort of job am I going to get with this? And I landed right in this skyscraper at the corner of 42nd Street and Broadway in New York. And, I felt like I was on top of the world for a little while.
What surprised you the most about working at the Met? Was it different from what you expected when you first started?
Yes. I mean, when I first started, I was very quiet. What I loved about the job was the part that you might expect, which is you're spending all this time standing in corners, watching people watch art. What I don't think I expected was the world within the museum that I found, which is that at the Met, there are 500 guards and 2,000 people work there, and 7 million people come into that building every year. And the just fascinating levels of human connections inside that place. I wasn't quite prepared for that. I thought that I would just spend all my time being quiet and watchful and looking at the arts and quietly looking at the people. But what I found, the more time I was on the job, the more I sort of was interested in how that place worked and how it functioned, and my fellow guards and their lives. And there's just a huge wealth, not only of art in that place, but of humanity.
I used to go to the museums and look at the guard sometimes. And I wonder what they are thinking standing there all day. What kind of people were the security guard who worked with you at the Met?
I mean, it's every kind of person.
Really?
Which is wonderful. I mean, when I worked at the New Yorker magazine, most people who work at the New Yorker magazine have followed a similar path in life because they're interested in doing that kind of work. Whereas most people don't set out in life to become a museum guard, especially when in New York City, so many of those people come from every country that you can imagine. So they've taken every different path in order to be there. So some of them back home have been lawyers or commercial airline pilots or cab drivers in New York City or kindergarten teachers or just everything that you can imagine. And what it means is that they're thinking all sorts of thoughts when they're standing there on post. Maybe they're thinking about the art, maybe they're thinking about their life, maybe they're thinking about, they had a conversation with one of their fellow guards or they observe someone in the gallery who's being, misbehaving or behaving in an interesting way that catches their attention. I mean, I found with all those hours to think, you think in sort of longer wavelengths than you might be used to. You don't just think one thought and then the next and then the next, like you have to get something done over the course of a normal day. Your thoughts can breathe and move in different directions and kind of be in different channels and different rhythms. And I found that very interesting and very liberating. And I think to the extent that I figured out a way to write a book about art that was maybe a little different than the way that people usually write about art, it's because I had all of that time to think in those different ways.
I don't think that every security guard at the Met write a book like you. I think you must have been a special person among them, right?
I would say, I mean, so many people have so many talents there.
Oh, yeah?
I know guards who write poetry and who play music and who are stand-up comedians. I know someone who's been on the game show Jeopardy!
Oh, really?
I know lots of artists. I mean, there are sculptors and painters and people who make quilts and just everything you can imagine, strange kind of contemporary arts as well. Because I think that it does draw people who don't want to be pushed around maybe, who like to think their own thoughts, who like to be around interesting and beautiful things. So yeah, of course the book that I wrote is unique to me, but there are people who have a huge range of different stories inside there.
How long have you been working in that role?
I worked there for 10 years.
10 years, decade. Okay. What is the most unforgettable moment from your 10 years at the Met?
Oh, geez. I mean, maybe one of the most shocking moments was I was working a special exhibition of Picasso paintings once. It was a blockbuster exhibition. So we click in like 1,400 people every hour. And people like to get up close to the paintings, and we're trying to keep them a little bit of a distance. And there was a man who wasn't following directions, and he just went in between the crowd and the paintings, and he threw his shoulder into Picasso's painting, The Woman in White. And it's hung by these copper cords up near the ceiling, and it just swings on those copper cords like this. And for a minute, I thought there had been an earthquake or something. It was so shocking. And everyone in the room screamed, "Oh!" But it was okay. The Picasso wasn't harmed in the end.
In that decade, did you experience any accident?
Over my time there, so a woman tripped into a Picasso and tore it in the bottom. We always have to tell people to take their backpacks off because people aren't paying attention to their backpacks. And someone turned and scraped this wood inlay, this beautiful wood inlay from Renaissance Florence. So I think those are the most significant art damage in my time there. Luckily, I wasn't the guard on post for either of those times.
Have you had any funny or surprising encounters with visitors, especially Korean visitors?
Oh, especially Korean visitors. I mean, I meet Koreans now because people have heard my book, which is so fun. People are very inquisitive and very kind. Yeah. Oh, you get all sorts of different kinds of visitors. So you get visitors at the Met who have never been to the Met before and maybe never have been to any big art museum before. And they want to know if the Mona Lisa is there. They want to know if we have dinosaurs in that museum. Are there any dinosaurs here? Or they want to know if things are real. And they can't believe that anything they're looking at is real, was actually made in ancient Egypt, 4,000 years ago. And then I would get to break the good news to them that, yeah, it's real.
It's real.
But maybe for that reason, you asked for something kind of surprising that someone had done. I had a young man try to sit on an ancient Venus statue and sit in her lap. And I stopped this young man, and he was very polite. He just didn't know the rules. He didn't know he wasn't supposed to do that. But he looked at this Venus statue, and she was missing her head and missing her arms. And then he looked all around the Roman court, which there's statues everywhere that have broken off pieces. And he said, "So all this broken stuff, it broke in here?" And I'd tell him, no, it didn't break in here, but we're here to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen.
That's a funny story.
It is, yeah.
In your book, you talk about learning from art, not learning about art, right? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that curators in art museums and scholars and academics, they're very interested in learning about art, in learning the styles and the schools and the time periods and what artists influenced other artists and things like that. And I agree that that's an interesting subject, and some people are very interested in that. But I always found at the museum that if you look at what this art is itself about, this art is usually about life and death and suffering and the miraculous nature of this world that you and I share, and the miraculous nature of the species that we are and all the talents we have. And art is exploring all of those things. And if you go into an art museum and you say, well, I don't particularly care about schools and styles in art history, but I do want to know about this short life that I'm living on this earth, you can use art to help teach you about those things and help contemplate those things, whether or not you know anything about, the academic subject of art history. And I would encourage people to do that because the artists themselves, of course, that's what they were doing. I mean, those artists, many of them wouldn't have even have conceived of them as artists, themselves as artists in the way that we might. They weren't making something to be in an art museum. Frequently, they were making something that was a funeral marker, or that was a sort of something to be contemplated spiritually for meditative practice or something like that. And if you go into an art museum and you use the art for the way that it was intended to be used, then that's very valuable.
So what do you think are the greatest life lesson that art can teach you?
Oh, I mean, I think the lessons are going to be different for everybody, of course, because there's such a range of arts and so many people who have thought about the world in so many different ways. But I mean, I think kind of the simplest lesson common to a lot of art is the beauty of this world and the strangeness of it and the mystery of it and the sort of the things about the visible world that maybe it's difficult to have names for or difficult to have words to describe. But something like art that is concrete and colorful and present can express something about this existence that we're a part of that feels almost beyond words. And I think that looking at art can teach you the way that artists have looked out at the universe and questioned it and marveled at it and felt grateful for it, maybe felt terrified of it. And it can put us in touch with that sort of vibrating, that kind of amazed sense.
During your time at the Met, which artwork inspired you the most?
I think different artworks would inspire me at different times. One I will shout out is this great painting called The Harvesters by Peter Bruegel. This is painted in 1565 in the Netherlands. And it is ravishingly beautiful. It's a big landscape. And it's really the first true landscape in the history of Western art, meaning it's not a landscape that's a background for some religious scene that's happening in the foreground. The background is the foreground. It's just a painting of the world that Bruegel would have seen around him. And I think sometimes the world that's right in front of us can be the thing that seems least worthy of putting in a work of art. And it was a sort of breakthrough of the Renaissance and of people like Bruegel to kind of look at the world with these fresh eyes and recreate it with the sort of the same brilliance that they would give to an allegorical scene or something. And it just feels like this window. It's a painting that feels like it's just about life and just about the world that we inhabit. And you see the people who are working in the fields, and you see the peasants who are taking the break from work, and one of them's having a nap, and the other ones are eating a meal, and it feels like it's about so much, about the human condition.
When we encounter great works of art, we often struggle with the question like this: how should I interpret this? I don't have any background knowledge about it. How am I supposed to appreciate it? For people like us who feel this way, what advice would you give?
I mean, I would say learning about something is fantastic. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't go home and read about it or read the labels and things like that. But you also, if you have limited time with that work of art and you're looking at this thing face to face, don't waste your time feeling inadequate, feeling like, oh, I wish I knew more about this. You're face to face with it. You know, it is performing just to you. And try to feel it, you know, try to get into its music. Try to bring yourself to it. Because yes, you are not an expert in that. But that artist, whether they lived in ancient Greece or whether they lived in, you know, medieval period Korea or 19th century America, they're human beings. You're a human being. You have a mind very much like theirs in some ways, different from them in some ways, and the same from them in some ways. And as I said before, they are often commenting on the same struggles that you had with your brother or that I had with my brother, or and you shouldn't feel intimidated with that time that you have with the work of art. Try to make the most of it. Try to learn something. Try to think about the same topics the artist, him or herself, were thinking about. And then go home and read a book and come back some other time, being a little more educated.
Right. I know the tips, actually. After reading your book, I believe visiting the Met would be a much more enriching experience.
Oh, I'm glad.
Right?
I'm glad.
This is not a book to be read just once. It is filled with beautiful written sentences and rich stories about art. I surely hope my subscribers take the time to read this.
Oh, thank you. I'd be delighted if they do.
Did I say that well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, have at it.
I have a special question for you. If I had only 5 minutes at the Met, what would you recommend I see? And why?
Ooh, 5 minutes. I mean, I would recommend you do one of two things. One thing you should do is just get a sense of the breadth of that place, meaning the expanse of it. So one thing you could do in 5 minutes is just walk, and you'll find that you move from ancient Rome to Greece to Egypt to Dutch Golden Age to Ming Dynasty China, and just get a sense of how big this world is, how old, how diverse, how full of different types of beauty, different ways of conceiving this world, and just let it go by like pictures in a flip book, and just be amazed, and also be amazed by the vastness of that building, and that there's a ancient Egyptian pyramid here on Fifth Avenue in New York City, or not pyramid, but temple. But the other thing I would counsel you to do is stop in front of something and just spend time with it. Just spend time. 5 minutes is not nearly enough. I was just at the National Museum of Korea this morning, and I spent 3 hours, and that felt like nothing at all, because just in that quiet room of contemplation with the two bodhisattvas, if I was a guard, I would spend maybe 8 hours in a day just in that room. And that gives art a chance to really impress something on you.
That's the answer that I never expected.
Oh yeah? What'd you expect?
I thought that you recommend one masterpiece.
Oh, one masterpiece.
To see.
Yeah. No, I don't recommend
But
that.
I like your answer.
Oh, good.
Yeah, okay. After you're spending in a decade at the Met, what was the reason you left your job as a security guard at the Met?
Really, the whole book is about that in some ways, sort of becoming able to feel ready. I mean, I think I spent a lot of time sort of being quiet and sort of stepped out from the forward movement of the world. And over the course of my time there, I sort of gradually learned how to be back in rhythm with the world. And then eventually it just kind of felt time to have some new adventure. I had kids at that time too, and raising kids is so difficult.
Yeah, right.
It's so difficult. And there's felt something very funny about, I would go home and do all this hard work to try to make a life for these children. And then I would go to the museum and everything would be perfect and quiet and pristine. And there was something wonderful about that in a way. But also, I kind of became interested in wanting to try to get my hands dirty and wanting to try to make something, not just be standing to the side watching the art that other people have made. So I was motivated to try to write a book, for instance, at the end of my time there, just at the very end. So I don't know. I felt ready.
So what do you do now? Are you working as a full-time writer?
I am, yeah. I mean, I'm a full-time doing this sort of thing. Writing and talking. giving talks at museums, especially in America. I've spoken at a lot of museums, which is wonderful. Yeah, I want to write another book. And I also do tours. I do private tours of the Met, which is a nice way to make a little money and keep me writing.
I heard that your book is being adapted into a play and will be performed on the stage in New York, right?
Yes.
Could you tell me more about it?
Sure. So I will be playing the part of me, the part I was born to play.
Right.
Yeah, it's a one-man play. So it's just me.
A one-man play.
So it's about 80 minutes long, and we did it down in the South in America, in South Carolina, and it went well. So it looks like it's going to move to an off-Broadway theater this spring and run for at least a couple months this spring. But yeah, it's, there seemed to be something natural about writing a one-man play about a lonesome figure like a security guard, and there are projections behind me in frames that are like works of art. So as I'm talking about different things, you get to see some different things. But there are also flashbacks about time with my brother, and I sometimes am pretending I'm interacting with visitors and with my fellow guards.
Will you be performing?
I'm performing, yeah.
Really?
I am.
You're an actor?
I'm not an actor.
You know what? Now that I think about it, I remember reading in your book that your mother was a theater actress, right?
That's right.
Was
yes.
she an influence on you?
Yes. I mean, I think that probably when I was 8 years old, my mom was in a one-woman show where she played a great American poet named Emily Dickinson. And really, when I saw that when I was 8 is what made me want to be a writer, Emily Dickinson. And I love the theater. I think that there's something similar about an art museum and a theater. It's a place that feels a little sacred in a way because you're away from the ordinary world where everything's rushing around and there's a million details and there's a million things you have to get done, and you sort of shut all that off and you're here looking at something that's been created by a human being in the company of fellow human beings and having an experience with it. And writing a book was great fun, but of course I write a book and it flies 7,000 miles away to Korea and people read it here or they read it in their by themselves, and I don't get to sort of experience it with them. So it's really fun having written a play where I get to be with people where we're all experiencing this thing that I'm discussing.
Your book has resonated deeply with Korean readers. Why do you think Korean readers have connected so strongly with your story?
This every time I tell people that the book has been this great hit in Korea, they of course ask me that. So all I can answer is things that other Koreans have told me. And people seem to have different theories. I mean, I think the publisher 웅진 has done a wonderful job, and I think that people it got on some people's best of the year list or things like that. But I've heard someone told me that they were a relatively young person, and they said that they feel very stressed out and very driven to succeed, and it's a very driven culture. And they were very interested in my book, which is about kind of stepping aside from that, work, and upward trajectory, stepping to the side of that and trying to kind of think in different ways and slow down. And I think she thought that the book was a sort of escape in that way. I have also heard that someone told me that he said, well, your book is very American. And I said, oh yeah, how do you mean? And he said, well, you live in this very diverse culture and this very young culture where people all come from different backgrounds, and thus you don't think that there is only one way to think about things and to look at things. Okay. So it gives you a great freedom when you look at art because you feel like you are qualified to do it. Whereas he said in Korea, because our culture is very old and more homogenous than the United States, there's a sense that there is a proper way to do some things, and in order to have the correct opinions about a certain type of art, you would have had to read a whole canon of scholarly texts about that. Whereas in America, we don't feel like we have a canon of scholarly texts because everything just flies in different directions in America. I don't know if he's right or wrong, but it was interesting to hear that. And it's not as if I think that that other approach is wrong either. It's just it's a different way to think about these questions. So he thought that my book was very interesting maybe to people who were interested in Western art, for instance, but felt that as Koreans, that how would they know how to have opinions on that? And that my book kind of shows, well, get in there, do your best.
How about getting a job in Korea and Korean museum?
You hiring? In a Korean
and
museum.
then after that, you write a book about our culture.
I know. Oh, I mean, if I got a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old child. Yeah. I mean, if in some different lifetime, I'd love to spend a year in that one museum and a year in another museum and just immerse myself in these different things. But I live in Brooklyn.
Actually, South Korea has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. Our society is fast changing and highly competitive. Why do you think art is important for people living in such a fast-paced and demanding society like us?
Yes. I mean, I always found, when you go to the Met, you can see how the little things that are on your mind that feel so immense and so important and like there's nothing else in this universe except those things, you can feel at the Met in a pleasant way, like all of that melts away because look how small I am compared to all this huge world that we live in, compared to all these different time periods and all of this vastness and majesty and mystery in this world that these artists are, have devoted their lives to thinking about. And maybe I should spend a little less time being so in my own head and a little more time out in this world. And I think that is therapeutic. It's helpful for people. And it I don't know, it puts you in touch with it makes reality feel thicker and have a weight to it that I at least find is helpful for me.
Do you have any upcoming book project or new plans you'd like to share?
Yeah, I am working on another book, but I'm in the very early stages, so I can't really say too much. I can say that it's wonderful trying to go out and think new thoughts, because promoting this book is great fun, but it's all me talking about something that had already happened, and this is me trying to take some of those same lessons about how I learned to see things and look at things, but return to art museums, but also push beyond that, out into this world and try to look at things, I don't know, differently in a new way. So we'll see. I'm sorry, that was very vague, but I'm not quite ready to share.
Okay. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Lastly, could you share a few words of encouragement or any message for your Korean readers?
Oh, sure. I mean, I will express gratitude is the first thing that I'll express. I have met so many very open-hearted Korean readers, wide-eyed and open-hearted about the message in my book, and I'm very grateful for that. So I suppose I would encourage them to take that message seriously and to go out and find what they're passionate about and what it leads them to go out into the world and see and experience and think on maybe a deeper level than they would just in ordinary everyday life.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I hope to meet you again in New York someday.
Come, please. I'll show you around the Met.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.